Okay, so today we're going to look at stress and coping experiences within dual career athletes. So we know badminton is a really stressful sport in itself. Lots of performance demands, recovery off court after numerous different tournaments. So the dual career is something that can actually really benefit athletes. It can develop a broader identity, so having other interests outside of badminton. It can offer future opportunities for employment, because we know that career can come to an end at some point. And then finally, we know that actually it can offer some financial support as well. So alongside badminton, you could have future income. So one particular dual career pathway that can be really beneficial for an athlete is university. But for those of us that have had a degree or gone through that process, the degree itself is really stressful. So that coupled with badminton is going to be a really demanding experience for them. Some of which also undertake coaching roles alongside their performance and university settings. So the World Badminton Federation funded this project on looking at the stress and coping experiences of dual career athletes. What do they do to cope with these particular demands that they experience? And are these coping strategies beneficial for their well-being and performance? Alongside this, we wanted to explore the key stakeholders' perceptions of stress and coping, and if they believe that their athletes are effectively coping with the performance and academic demands that they're experiencing. So how did we do this? Typically within stress research, we conduct interviews following a particular experience, but we know actually stress is something that can fluctuate across time. So the aim of this particular research was to conduct a project over the course of a month that explored their stress and coping experiences across their day-to-day lives. We had 8 badminton athletes take part in this particular project across different degree programmes, and they all participated within gold competitions. And within the English badminton system, the gold competitions for those athletes that are competing at national level. And we recruited these athletes through contacting their university, but also via Instagram and Twitter. And they were offered £30 per week to take part in this study if they completed their full diaries of reflection. So what were their diaries of reflection? These were the typical texts that they received across their day. So they had 3 texts across one day in order to understand what were their demands and how they coped with the particular demands that they experienced, but also what were the intensity of the demands that they experienced. We chose days Sunday, Monday and Wednesday. So Sunday was chosen because that was either a rest day or a tournament day for the athlete. Monday was chosen because that was typically a double day of training and lectures, and then Wednesday was a university competitive day, and some of which had lectures alongside it. So we had a nice blend of experiences, competition and academic and personal. And then following this data collection, we interviewed the scholarship managers of the respective athletes. So we contacted the scholarship managers of the athletes that took part within this study. So there was a lot of data, but what I'm going to do is give you guys kind of some key take-home messages and some key implications to hopefully embed within your coaching practices. So the first one was understanding that actually stress isn't always a bad thing. To facilitate well-being and performance, we need to be challenged in our day-to-day lives. But there's a difference. Those that were able to appraise their stress experiences as a challenge were able to thrive within their performance and academic settings. On the other hand, those that were appraising their stresses as more of a threat or harm were likely to have a decline in performance and well-being. So on the slide here you can see the mention of coping resources. And in psychology, coping resources can mean things like confidence, resilience, mental toughness, but it can also mean social support, tangible support like finance. So as coaches, we can consider how can we build up our athletes' coping resources to enable them to experience more of this challenge mindset. So I've got some quotes now on the slide, so hopefully you can read Sam now, and this is an example of a challenge appraisal.
So you need to have that in mind when you coach players who have suffered a major injury. Expectations from you as a coach.
So Sam's voice recording here is that of a challenge appraisal, because she's identified that it's unpleasant for her to be watching her teammates perform because she didn't make the final. But actually this could be a fantastic opportunity for her to learn and grow as a player. So she's viewing this demand as something that's beneficial and something that could potentially enhance her performance in the future. On the other hand, we've got Lewis. So if you want to take a read of that quote.
And then we know that we have like 10 videos on the internet, but that's maybe not also representative. So he asked all the international.
So here you can identify that Lewis is feeling exceptionally nervous, and we know nervous energy can be a good thing at times because it can help energise our performance, but here you can see it's become distracting for him. This nervous energy has now gone into this threat appraisal, and subsequently it's had a negative impact upon his performance. So ideally as coaches, we want to be building the athletes' coping resources to help them gain the benefits of challenge appraisal. So our next slide is looking at dispositional coping. So dispositional coping is the way our athlete typically responds to demands. So each of your athletes is going to be confronted with a stressor, and typically they will respond to that in the same way. So Lewis here, let's have a read of this. So Lewis's quote is identified that exercise is something for him to help cope with the unpleasant demands, particularly if his training session doesn't go well. As badminton coaches, you know that some of your athletes are training twice a day. So if on top of that, your athlete is then engaging in intense weight exercises, this could potentially increase the risk of injury. So what's really lovely in week 2 is that Lewis has identified that his S&C coach is now having a conversation with him about engaging in yoga. So the S&C coach has picked up that Lewis is typically responding to stress by engaging in this intense weight exercise, and is suggesting alternate forms for him to cope with these unpleasant emotions that he's experiencing. So this is a really fantastic example of how knowing your athlete could help potentially reduce the rate of injury, but also enable them to cope with demands in the same way that they typically do. So this then moves us on to something then called coping flexibility. On the court, you're going to be confronted with numerous different demands, and you maybe have to adjust the way that you cope with them. Similarly, in academia, you can be confronted with different demands, and you may have to adjust the way that you cope with those particular demands. So as coaches, we can try and help them develop the skill set to be able to refine these strategies and know when they're appropriate to use or when they may not be appropriate to use. So Steph here is a really nice example of how coping flexibility is important. Because you can see here that actually engaging in cooking a healthy meal and relaxing is helping her manage those unpleasant emotions following a hard day of training and university. But we know that there's deadlines. And if we always engage in this way of coping, those deadlines are going to approach and our stress can potentially build. So this is where knowing when that coping strategy is effective or when it's not effective can be really important. So this brings us into our key stakeholders, and this marries up quite nicely with some of the findings here. So firstly, the relationship with the athlete. The scholarship managers have suggested if the relationship with the athlete was poor or they didn't really know them, then they couldn't help that athlete to the best of their ability. And that's exactly what we found within the study. The S&C coach, for example, really knew their athlete, and that's where they were able to suggest alternate ways of helping that athlete cope. Similarly, the staff not understanding the demands that the athlete is experiencing can inhibit the provision put in place. So some of these athletes within the study also had coaching roles, and the scholarship managers were unaware of the coaching roles that the athletes were taking part in. So how were they able to best support the athlete if they didn't have that full set of information? This research project actually we found had a benefit for the athletes in addition to data collection. So some of the athletes had fed back that being prompted to reflect 3 times a week was really helpful for them in refining how they coped, but also the intensity of some of the stresses and how some of these stresses were quite challenging for them to cope with. But Olivia was, again, a really nice example. She said she's just this crack on and get it done type of person, and that's how she copes, and she feels that she's fine with her day-to-day life. But throughout the 4 weeks, Olivia had cited that the time difference between getting to lectures and getting to training was really tight, that she was rating this as a 7 out of 10 stressor every week. A conversation with the coach or with the lecturer and moving that session by 15 minutes could have eliminated this stressor in the first place. So what this study suggested, that yes, reflective practice is really good for our athletes, but we want to be challenging them on the ways that they cope. And are these ways of coping always really beneficial, or can we help them develop more coping flexibility with what they're confronted with? So, key take-home messages. Firstly, we want our athlete to be able to develop coping flexibility. So develop the number of strategies that they've got to hand, and when these strategies are particularly applicable to different demands. Reflect. So we want to be engaged in reflective practice with our athletes. Time is commonly something that people say is a factor to why they don't reflect. But this study evidenced that actually athletes can reflect 3 times a day, quite easily on their mobile phones 3 times a week, which can really help develop their psychological ways of coping. Our coach, really understand your athletes. Really understand their lives on and off the court. How do they typically cope to stressors? So again, this study identified, if you identify what demands they're under, this can really help them manage those demands or alleviate stress. And our university staff, again, understand the athlete. What stresses are they confronted with? How do they typically cope? And one way to engage in reflective practice with the athletes is potentially make this part of the scholarship conditions. So to obtain your scholarship, you must engage in reflective practice 3 times a week, for example. So thanks for listening. If you've got any questions, feel free to email. Additionally, if you want some of these questions that we used within the study to help support your athletes and how they reflect, I'm more than happy to send those over to you. And that's me.